Hello and welcome to From the Nosebleeds podcast about college football and college basketball, brought to you by myself, Walter Limbeck, and Jacob Wetzel.
Um, would you rather take the 6.5 with Cincinnati or the 4.5 with West Virginia?
So that's interesting. I'd probably rather take the 6.5 with Cincinnati. And here's my reasoning: I trust Cincinnati more than I trust West Virginia. I
Okay.
know
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that West Virginia Kansas State game is weird because Kansas
Mm-hmm.
State's the ranked team. They're undefeated in conference, yet they're underdogs. So that screams something to me to stay
Mm-hmm.
away from. Uh, but also, I trust Cincinnati more.
Okay. Okay. I think I'd probably go opposite of you. I think I'd rather take the 4.5 with West Virginia simply because late in the fourth quarter, if Memphis has the ball and Cincinnati's up by 14, or late in the fourth quarter, Kansas State has the ball, West Virginia's up by 7. I think I'm more fearful of Memphis scoring that score to get the backdoor cover than I am for West Virginia than I am of Kansas State. And I know you can't anticipate the backdoor cover, right? You can't, but um, I think late in the fourth quarter, if Memphis has the football, they have a better chance of scoring, even against that Cincinnati defense in West Virginia than Kansas State does. Also, Kansas State backup quarterback. You're going on the road. You're playing a team in West Virginia that's middle of the pack, but is playing better of late. Um, I don't know. I think I'd rather take West Virginia in the 4.5, just because if Kansas State has the ball late in the game and it's a 7-10 point ball game. Um, I think I'm not as afraid as I would be if it was the other way around with Cincinnati and Memphis.
That's fair. I could see it both. I could see it both ways, but
For sure, for sure.
I just trust Cincinnati more than I would trust West
Hmm.
Virginia. So that's what my only reasoning. Um, some other games I'm looking at. You've talked about the UCF Houston line. It's at 82.5. The over under. I think I'm on that
Outrageous.
because UCF averages over 600 yards of offense per game. They can
Hmm.
run the ball. They can throw the ball, obviously, with Dylan Gabriel. Um, Houston put up or gave up 43 to BYU, and I think
Hmm.
UCF's offense overall is a little more dynamic, but at the same time, UCF does not play defense whatsoever this year. They're giving up over 400 yards per game, and I think Houston will be able to expose that and move the ball just as well as UCF is. And I could see this game ending in the 50s for both teams.
Yeah. This is an interesting game. I think one. I don't. I would think UCF would be favored by more than 3, 2.5, 3. But so that's kind of interesting. But I mean, 82.5, man. That's a lot. It's crazy to think that that's a lot of points. It is a huge over under. But you don't have to talk yourself into taking it, right? Like you can look at this game and say, well, UCF can easily put up 50 points. Now all I need is 30, 32 from Houston, which
Well,
is doable.
and the interesting thing is the last over under this high was back in 2018, Oklahoma, West Virginia.
Hmm.
West Virginia coach then, Dana
Dana
Holgorsen,
Holgerson.
who's
Yep.
on the sidelines for Houston. So,
Yeah, I mean that's wow. Yeah, that's interesting. Man, that's high. I hit on it earlier. I like Georgia minus a 17. I think Kentucky just struggles to score. I think Kentucky's lucky if they score 10, in which case you need Georgia to score 4 touchdowns, which is doable. I think you look at this game and you just see two completely different teams. I think you see Georgia, who is dominant, who is I think probably the second the third best team in the SEC against Kentucky, who's trending in the wrong direction, who has struggled recently. I mean, they got the big win. I mean, I guess you can say big, but they got the win against Mississippi State, get their first win of the season. Then they beat Tennessee after getting like 4 interceptions or whatever. Um, and then they kind of come back down to earth against Missouri. I think they just struggle to move the football all day. I think they probably finish with like 200 yards of offense, and just Georgia just makes it tough on them. And I think Georgia minus 17. I think this game ends up being 21, 24 point game.
I like that, but I'm gonna do a different bet for that game. I'm actually gonna take the over, 42 and a half.
Hmm.
Georgia on the road since 2018. Overs are 7-3 in conference play on the road. Their records around the same there for the overs. I like the over in that game. Like you said, 17 and a half. You could easily see Georgia winning by 3 or 4 touchdowns there. I think Georgia scores enough points for this over to pass. Uh, so I'm going to take that over.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think Georgia almost does it on their by themselves.
Yes.
I agree with you there.
Easily see that.
Um, Another one I like. We talked up Coastal Carolina, but we both agree they're in a tough spot.
Mhm.
I think I would take the Georgia State plus 3.5 simply because I think it's a close game. I think it's a game that Georgia State doesn't fear. I think it's I think they like themselves in this situation, and
Mhm.
3.5 is a line where Coastal Carolina kicks a field goal at the end of the game to win the game, and Georgia State still covers, right? So same thing with the West Virginia game. I mentioned I think I would take West Virginia minus the 4.5, but you take Kansas State, they kick a field goal into the game to win, or West Virginia kicks a field goal into the game late to win, and you still cover. So um, just interesting there, but I think Georgia State wins outright. Honestly, I think they beat Coastal Carolina going in their second game without their starting quarterback. Um, Georgia State's you look at Georgia State and they beat a decent Troy team on the road by 2. They lost a tough game by 7 at Arkansas State where there was absolutely no defense played in that game.
That was a good
Um,
game.
59-52.
Yeah.
They beat East Carolina, and they by 20. They lose their first game of the year in overtime to Louisiana on just a weird overtime, weird end of the game scenarios. So I think this is a good Georgia State team where you look at their 2 losses and you say those were winnable games. They were right there to win. I think Georgia State wins outright and beats Coastal. And it's tough because I like Coastal. They're a team I'm going to cheer for the entire year. But um, I like the Georgia State plus 3.5 because I think they win outright.
Yeah, I don't have anything on that game, but I'm definitely looking at the money line. I usually like to take a couple of money line dogs every week.
Hmm.
And, I think Georgia State, like I said, is putting Coastal Carolina on upset alert, and I might eventually take that. I'm going to get into another game I like, and now I'm a little couple questions about it. Originally, I liked the Clemson over because I thought Clemson would come out flying against BC after
Hmm.
a letdown last week where your offense didn't look too great, and now I'm kind of questioning it without Trevor Lawrence. But I think the thing that makes me still lean towards this over is the fact that you still have Travis Etienne, still have Amari
Hmm.
Rogers on the outside. You don't go that far down. Yeah, DJ doesn't have as much experience, but he's still a good quarterback, and I still think they can get the job done. Uh, Little questions there on the BC side of the ball because Clemson is a good defense. I think Clemson gets into the second half though with a comfortable lead and starts to pull some guys, get rested up for that Notre Dame game.
Okay, yeah, I can see that for sure. Game I game I'm throwing out there for our good mutual friend Jake Masters. Iowa 2.5 at home against Northwestern. Northwestern, we both agreed looked good. Granted, be against Maryland,
Mhm.
but I don't think either one of us came away questioning much about Iowa. Seems like a game that these seem like games that Kirk Ferentz in his time at Iowa has won.
Mhm.
Close games at home. Um, I was texting with Jake earlier. He said these are games that Iowa doesn't usually struggle in, right? Like these are games that Iowa wins by 2 possessions or whatever, and he said no way Iowa loses at home to Northwestern. So
Yeah.
I like what I saw from Northwestern, but I'm going to ride with my buddy Jake there. I think Iowa wins outright, and I think it's by more than the 2.5.
I'd agree with you. I mean, it's kind of a get right game for Iowa.
Hmm.
Show people that, while they did lose to Purdue, they're still a good team. Speaking of Purdue, this is a team I've told you I like a lot. I've got some futures on Purdue. I think they go out against Illinois, and I think they cover. Uh, the last 2 years, going into this year as well. So they're 13-6 against the spread in conference games. They're 7-3 against the spread on their road. I like this team a lot. I like the weapons on the outside, and I didn't see much from Illinois to make me think that they could stop, David Belt from having a career
Hmm.
game. They
Hmm.
struggled to cover up against Wisconsin's tight ends and wide receivers. They were open all game, and I think David Bell will find him wide open quite often. So I like Purdue a lot. Last I saw, they were only favored by 7 points, so I'm going to take them.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think that's I don't think Illinois showed you anything against Wisconsin that makes you like them as a team. I mean, it's a winnable game for Illinois, sure, but I agree with you. I think Purdue showed that they can score, they can produce without more, and that's that. I think that was the biggest question people had for their game. Um, Tonight, I'm gonna go with the game again tonight. Minnesota at Maryland. Maryland's getting 18.5 right now on ESPN. But I'm gonna go with the over under 61. I'm gonna go over. I think it's reasonable to think after seeing what Northwestern did to Maryland, Minnesota can't put up 42 points against them, if not more. And I think this is a game where PJ Fleck, like you said with Purdue, or excuse me, like you said earlier, I can't remember exactly who you said it with, but they try to come out on fire, try to come out, maybe a little pissed off, maybe a little bit angry. I think Minnesota comes out, just lays the wood to Maryland. I don't know if I'm going to give Minnesota 18.5 just because weird things Friday night. Never know. Maybe Maryland scores a late touchdown, keeps it within 3 touchdowns, but
Also, don't
61
know
I think
about
is doable.
yeah.
What's
Also,
that?
don't know about that defense after the game against
Yeah,
Michigan.
I
So
think I think it's reasonable to think that this game ends up, 45-21, maybe something like that. 45, um, or 48-21. I'm not saying Minnesota can't cover the 18.5, but I think Minnesota puts up a lot of points. I think Maryland figures it out a little bit now. Maybe gets 2-3 offensive touchdowns, and I think I like the over there. I think PJ Fleck's a great coach, and I think he's going to have his guys a little fire in them, little hunger. I think it's same thing with Rutgers. It's tough to go to Maryland as a true Big Ten team in Minnesota and get excited to play. But I think coming off the loss and now knowing Wisconsin's not really, who knows what they are now, I think it gives you a little extra motivation to say, hey, we can win this division. Let's come out and take care of our business and win that game. So I'm gonna go on the over 61 there. Um, had another over under for you, or another would you rather question here. I'm gonna go with some big lines. Would you rather lay the 21.5 with Michigan with that line, or the 20, or excuse me, the 30.5 with Alabama.
That's interesting because I actually have both of those.
Okay.
So I'd rather lay with both of them because, and I'll tell you why.
hmm
I think
Go ahead.
I think Mississippi State hasn't shown you anything.
No.
We've lost a couple players that, Mike Leake's getting out of the program. Kellen Hill sitting out, arguably your best player on offense.
hmm hmm
He's, opting out the rest of the year, getting ready for the draft. So I think Mississippi State, there's nothing there to be desired. Alabama is going to continue the train rolling. Michigan State, I think they've got a new coach. He came in February, hasn't had a lot of time to get his guys implemented into his system, how he wants to play. So I think I'm going to take Michigan with that. I know it's a rivalry game, usually a little closer, weird things happen, but I think Michigan's going to be trying to make statements early when they can. And I think this is one where you can make a big statement. I think Michigan State, unfortunately for them, just hasn't had enough time to get acclimated with the system that their coach wants them to play in. And I think you got to take Michigan there. I think they'll impose their will on Michigan
hmm
State.
Um, I agree with you. I think it just was a bizarre sequence of events that happened with Michigan State, with D'Antoni leaving kind of abruptly. I think Michigan looked good against Minnesota. I think they're playing a lesser team in Michigan State, but they'll still get up for the game, being a rivalry game. I think Michigan State's not good this year. I think they're in a rebuild. Um, Alabama, I have been on Alabama this year. I think I hit them a little earlier. I think their offense scores as many points as they want to on anybody. They played all of the game last game without Waddle, so they know how to play without him. 30.5 is a lot, but I mean, what do we realistically expect Mississippi State to put up? 17?
I had no idea.
21?
I don't have
Like,
any. It's hard to tell because they came out against LSU firing, and ever
mhm,
since then, their offense hasn't looked anywhere near that. They've had all the turnovers. Now you got guys leaving the program.
yeah.
So
This was the question. This was the big question when they hired Mike Leach, right? Is his system worked in the Big 12? It worked in the Pac-12. Can it work in the SEC?
I
Early
think
returns say no.
I'm going to pause you on that because I think big thing is they didn't have a lot of the guys he wanted. He
hmm
inherited the program. Yes, they get KJ Costello to transfer, but it wasn't necessarily the quarterback
He's not
that
the
you
guy.
want.
No, no.
It's not necessarily the guy you want. So I think right now you got to pause on it because a lot
hmm
of these guys are inherited. They're not necessarily the guys he wants in his program. And it's going to take a year or two for him to get the guys he wants.
hmm
So, you know, it's not going to look great for Mississippi State the rest of the year, but just know Leak is trying to get his system in there, trying to get his guys in there. So,
Yeah. I understand and I agree you got to give coaches time, especially when you're bringing in or you're changing the offensive scheme entirely.
mhm.
Same thing we talked about with Georgia State. I just Alabama, man, they've looked good in about every game they've played in. Overall, I think 30.5 is a big number, but I think I agree with you. I think I'd be comfortable with that with Alabama. Um, uh, it's just a lot of points. 30.5. Last game, I got two more games I wanted to hit on. First one, North Carolina and Virginia. We talked about North Carolina. We both like them. They're only giving 7 points on the road in Charlottesville. I don't. Is there something that we're missing with this line? Is there a reason why it is only 7 points when North Carolina is head and shoulders better than Virginia?
I think it's an overreaction to the game Virginia played last week, where they kept it close against Miami. people think Miami and North Carolina are on the same level.
Mm-hmm.
I'd agree they're pretty similar, but I think North Carolina is a different team offensively. I mentioned we've both mentioned Sam Howell. And
Mm-hmm.
I hit on the fact that they've got two running backs that are studs. I think, this is just an overreaction to how Virginia played last week.
Yeah. I mean, I think Indiana. I think Virginia just doesn't. There's just nothing to them, right? Like they're not a high-scoring team. They're not a great defensive team. They're just an team. We know what North Carolina is. They're a high-powered offense that's can score points, and their defense is average.
Right.
I mean, looking at this, I'm looking at a website right now with about the line. The line opened at 7, and it's the most it's changed, and it's gone to 6.5, which tells me people are taking Virginia. So the line hasn't moved, right? It's not like it started at 9 or 10 and it's gotten taken down to 7. I don't know I just don't know what to make of that line. I think it's a very weird, interesting line that makes you question yourself if you take North Carolina, right? Like you're
Yeah.
like, why am I getting North Carolina at 7 when they probably should be closer to, I think, 2 touchdowns?
Right. I'd agree. Like I said, though, I think it's just an overreaction to the game they played against Miami where the conditions weren't great. But,
And
I mean,
this is a game where it's like I think no matter the outcome, right? Like no matter the final score, you're gonna tell yourself the right side is North Carolina, right?
mhm,
Like no matter what happens, like there's those games where you're like, no matter at the end of the game, you're like, I know I lost, but I took the right side, and
right.
I think this is a game where Virginia could win, and you'd be like, North Carolina -7 was still the right play. And
Mhm.
anytime I think though that's the case before the game happens, you're kind of like, am I missing something? Is there something I'm not seeing? Um, yeah, I don't know. I think it's just a weird line.
It is.
But all right, you sir are up to bat. What you got?
All right. So I got a couple more games that I want to run through.
Hmm.
Um, First up, starting in the AAC with Memphis and Cincinnati. Luke Fickle, since taking over as Cincinnati head coach, unders are 27, 15, and 1. He knows how to play defense. He knows
Hmm.
how to stop teams. He goes against these high-powered offenses all the time, like you mentioned. I think, like you mentioned earlier, I think he does the same thing that happened last week against SMU. I think he stops Memphis on offense. Right now, the line's at 57. I think that's a little too high. Even if those injuries hold through till tomorrow, I still think Cincinnati pushes the game under. I still think they win outright. I'm not sure if they
Hmm.
cover, but I do think they hit that under.
Hmm.
Another game is the Kansas game. I mean, you mentioned it, fade Kansas, so I'm going to give that one out.
This is a tough game for me personally because I don't I don't think it's right to bet on your team, right? Like Iowa State's my team.
I
I
agree.
don't think I don't I think a lot of people agree that you can't bet on your team, but you also have to fade Kansas, right? Like you can't take Kansas.
Well, and
So,
here's what I'll say is I never give out UCF like
mhm.
points wise or anything like that. I'll take the over because I know they score a lot of points and I won't feel bad betting against them, betting on them or whatever. Um, but the thing, like we've talked about, Kansas is
Terrible.
historically bad, historically bad. So this is one of those games where you're like, okay, I usually don't bet on my team, but it's Kansas.
I think yeah, right, and I think the other thing is I kind of hit on this when I was talking about Iowa State during our recap. The game after Louisiana, they came out and played TCU, threw the ball around the yard, scored some points, looked good, looked like the team that people were expecting Iowa State to be. I think that's the same case here. I think Iowa State comes out. I think they put up 50 points. I think every guy on the roster catches a ball. The third walk-on practice string guy, catches a pass this week. I think they get the backup quarterback in there, Hunter Deckers, who they're high on. I think this is a game where they figure they get really aggressive offensively. They say we're taking shots downfield, we're doing this, we're doing that. I think they put up a lot of points, a lot of yards. I think they hang 50 on Kansas. Iowa State defensively, very, very good. Probably the best defense in the Big 12. I think Oklahoma State's right there, but I think Iowa State's still the best. And I've watched a lot of Kansas football this year. I'm almost ashamed to say that, but I've watched a lot of Kansas football. Puka Williams is by far their best player, and he is out. I
Yeah.
don't know how they scored points. I don't know where they moved the ball on Kansas State okay. They missed some field goals,
Here's the
missed
thing.
some points.
Here's the thing. Kansas State has a bad defense.
They
Like you
did, yeah.
said, Iowa
Hmm.
State plays defense, so that's why I'm confident in this one. Is Kansas State
Yes.
doesn't play defense, and they still covered, and they still only gave up 14 points. This is a
Yeah.
game I think
I
Kansas
I
will be lucky to reach double digits.
I don't. Kansas's best weapon now. They have a good wide receiver in Parchment. Um, I don't think he beats Iowa State. Iowa State plays a 3-3-5 defense. Keeps everything in front. They don't let anything beat them over the top. They try and really rally to the football. I think they lock down on him. They don't let him have more than a few catches. Biggest thing that concerns me as an Iowa State fan playing Kansas, their quarterback, who by the way is 17 years old, Kansas's quarterback, freshman. He's a running quarterback. Watching him against Kansas State, I know Kansas State doesn't have a good defense, but he was able to run and pick up some yards. Iowa State's not been great getting off the field on third down this year as they should be for how good their defense is, but that's one thing that concerns me. I think if Iowa State contains him a little bit, they'll be fine. And you're talking about a really good defensive line in Iowa State against a bad offensive line. I think that if when they try to pass, they're going to get pressure on them. That means you don't have to blitz as much with your linebackers. Your linebackers now can play a little more spy. So I agree. I think no matter what the line is, obviously to an extent, but no matter what the line is, the right side is always fading Kansas.
Yes. Another game I like. I'm going to take LSU. This line is actually down to 1.5 points right now,
I
live
think
on live
wasn't
on ESPN. So
wasn't LSU an underdog didn't LSU open as the underdog?
they did. And here's where I'm going to take them to is, I know usually people talk about it. If you open as an underdog, finish as a favorite, it's usually not a good sign. But here's the thing. Auburn could very well be winless right now. They could very well be winless, and I don't think this is a good Auburn team. I think LSU's starting to figure things out. It's taken them a couple games. They've had some bad losses, haven't looked great in some games, but I think they're starting to figure it out. They're starting to get the train rolling, and I think this
Mm-hmm.
is a game where they come in. It's not the normal LSU Auburn game where everybody's excited to watch, but I think LSU comes in, and I think they come in and win by double digits. I think Auburn is a bad team this year.
I agree with you. I don't know what to make of Auburn. I said it when we were doing the recap. I'm saying it again now. I think we'll be saying it at the end of the year.
Yeah.
We don't know what Auburn is. If they cannot run the football, then they are pretty much worthless on offense. They are a team that does everything off of the run. Gus Malzahn is a run heavy coach. It's just out of the shotgun and with spread principles. So I think I think LSU would be the right side, and that's simply because I think LSU wins outright. And with the line being that low, I think that would be um, the good side to take. Um, Last game I wanted to hit on. We were in the spot last week when you and I were texting back and forth. BYU, they're another 30-point favorite at home against a bad team who's got to make the trek out there to Provo. They're 30-point favorite. I said last week I liked them the 30 points. I said I think that they're in that spot with Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State where they are trying to embarrass every team they play and trying to show off the guys that they have, especially Zach Wilson. They're a 30-point favorite this week. The over-under is 52.5, which I think is about what it was last week against Texas State. They're playing Western Kentucky this week, who needed a kick return. I saw this it was on Bad Beats on Scott Van Pelt's show. Needed a kick return and late in the fourth quarter, like a minute and a half left to beat Tennessee Chattanooga, who played their one and only game
Mm-hmm.
against them last week. Um, they're not a good team. They've lost by between 6 and 14 points pretty much every team they play. I don't know if I'd want to lay the 30th BYU again, simply because I think they played a team a little bit worse than Western Kentucky last week in Texas State, and it took their punter basically going against their coaching advice and running a punter keep on fourth down to keep that drive alive for them to score and cover the 30 last week. So if I played this game, I think I would take the over, simply because 52.5, no reason in my mind why BYU can't score 40 points. I think this game is exactly what it was last week. I think BYU puts up anywhere between 45 and 50, and the other team scores 2 touchdowns, and you get your over easily. Last week, BYU scored 52. I don't see why why they can't do it again this week, and I don't see why Western Kentucky can't score 10, 14 points, even if one of them is late. So I think I would take the over in that game. Simply because I like I like what I've seen with BYU and their offense. I think Zach Wilson's very, very good, and it's a 9:15 kick, so Central Time. So the late game chase excitement, because those other two games late at night out west are not games that I care to watch. So I'll watch a blowout with BYU before I watch Nevada and UNLV.
Yeah. I've got a couple games left. I'm going to take the Boise over against Air Force. I might lay the points as well with Boise. I think Boise is a pretty good team. I think that BYU game is going to be interesting. I like Bachmeier at quarterback for him. I think he's pretty good. They hit the over easily last week. This over-under is only at 49, and I think that's simply because Air Force looked pretty bad against San Jose State. But I think Boise takes advantage of that, and I think they could hit the over by themselves. I also think they probably cover, so I'm going to give that one out.
Do
Um,
you let me ask you this. Do you Does it make you think a little bit about it a little more? Does it make you question a little more taking it over with a triple option team like Air Force?
I would
Because
say it makes me think a little more because I've been on Navy over-unders a couple times this year, and it's been close to the end. But at the same time, I think Boise's good enough offensively and that they're going to be able to score the points that they need. I think
okay.
Air Force probably scores a couple times, but you know, I don't think they do enough to stop them defensively. When you've got a team like Boise with a good quarterback, I I don't think the triple option scares me as much.
Okay. Yeah, I mean it's to me it's interesting because triple option don't score quick, right? You don't have a lot of playmakers. A lot of it is up the middle stuff and then counter it on the outsides. I watched that Air Force San Jose State game last week. I didn't like what I saw from Air Force. Tip the cap. We're talking about teams we like to see do well. Tip the cap San Jose State. Tip the cap to them 1-0. Probably going to be 2-0. It just I sometimes, to me, when I think about a triple option team having to score points to get you the over, it just, for me, causes a little hesitation. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, usually it would. Like I said, they've got a good quarterback. They've got a good offense. I could see Boise hitting 49 points by themselves.
Yeah.
So you only need a touchdown or two from Air Force realistically, and I think that's easily doable. Don't think Boise's defense is anything too special. I think they're solid, but I think that over is pretty easy. Next game I wanted to look at is the or Texas A&M and Arkansas game. I think that's an interesting game, simply because A&M here is favored right now. Give me a second. They're favored by 13 and a half.
Hmm.
And while A&M has is only loss is to Alabama, they've done nothing outside of the Florida game offensively to convince me that this is a good offense that can move the ball up and down on teams. Whereas Arkansas, every game has been close. Every game they've been in it, they've played pretty well. The outlier is the Georgia game wasn't close, but a lot of people were upset with how Georgia's offense played that day.
Yeah.
So I think giving A&M 13 and a half is, I think that's too many points for them. They've
Believing
looked
in,
good.
in Felipe, huh?
Yeah, they've looked good, but not great. And I think what Arkansas has shown leads me to believe this will be a closer game. I don't think there's going to be a lot of points, but I think Arkansas plays well enough to cover the 13 and a half.
Yeah. Texas A&M is an interesting team. You mentioned, that Georgia Arkansas game was close. I mean, Texas A&M won 17-12 against Vanderbilt in their first game. Then really every other game other than every game since then. I mean, Alabama game was what it was. They let up 52 points. They beat Florida by 3. That I thought they looked good in that game. I watched some of that game. I thought they looked good in that game, but I agree with you. Then they put up 28 points against Mississippi State, 24 points against Alabama. I agree with you. I think that Florida game can be looked at as a little bit of an outlier. I just it's tough. It's tough for me to put money on Arkansas to cover 13 less than 2 touchdowns essentially. So I see where you're going with that. I see your points, but Arkansas is one of those teams to me that it just Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Kansas, Syracuse, you associate them with the bottom of the conference, and you have a hard time, I think, feeling like you feel confident taking them in a game to cover the spread.
Hey, look, it's a weird year. It's 2020. You got everything going. I think Sam Pittman's done a decent job so far. And so that, I mean, that's why, looking at both teams, they play close games. That
Yeah,
makes me think that this isn't going to be a two-touchdown game.
I mean, hey, congrats to Arkansas, man. They're 4 games into the year and they've already hit their season win total. They've already won as many games as they have in the last like 3 years in the conference. I mean, congrats to them, but they're still. I think they're still a tough team to take a side on. But hey, you never know. It's been a weird year, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I've got two more left for you.
Hmm. Hit
Next
me.
one, I've got the big game of the weekend, Ohio State, Penn State. I think Ohio State covers. The line's actually moving down, so it
Yeah,
makes
it's
me even more confident in Ohio
10 and a
State.
half on ESPN right now.
Yeah, 10 down to 10 and a half. So I think there's a lot of questions that we had for this game, and they were all on the Penn State side mainly. And I think having no fans makes a difference. I think Ohio State comes out and they laid on Penn State. If Penn State turns over the ball twice, they get easily beat in this
Hmm.
game. So I'm pretty confident in Ohio State covering, especially when it's trending down. Makes me think that I'm going to be on the right side of this.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm probably not gonna play anything on it. Probably just sit back and watch it. That's kind of what I did last week with Michigan and Minnesota. But I agree with you. I think Ohio State wins. I think it's probably a 2-score. I think Ohio State comes out. I think Penn State scores the first touchdown just because they're at home, got probably more energy. I think they score the first touchdown. I think Ohio State then makes a 2 possession game, 2 touchdown game the rest of the
Yeah.
way, and they win by that, and if not more. I mean, Ohio State, they're the third best team, if not the second best team in the country, and I think everyone else outside of Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State is not on that level.
Yes, I'd agree. Last game I'm gonna give out. I'm gonna give out this one. Mizzou, Florida over. I like this because right now it's only sitting at 61 and a half. Hit on the Florida defense a little bit with A&M. The only time A&M's offense has looked any good was against Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I've hit on Mizzou. They've got a good young quarterback. He's not great, not anything special. Mizzou's a pretty balanced team when it comes to offense. Florida gives up almost 500 yards per game on defense.
Yeah.
Another thing, too, is Florida's been out of the mix for a couple weeks, sitting because of the COVID issues that they've had. So I think that makes me think, okay, the defense is probably going to be just as bad as they've been all year. And I think there's going to be a lot of points in this one.
I agree with you about the Florida defense. They've not been. I mean, they played Ole Miss that week one, and Ole Miss went toe for toe, back and forth, answered them score for a while. A&M obviously beat them 41-38, but A&M, I mean, A&M had no problem going up and down the field against Florida. I agree with you. I think that defense is not great. Their offense was humming before
Mm-hmm.
the COVID stuff, 51, 38, 38. And I mean, it it's tough to I think see how teams are going to come out and play their first game after a 2 weeks off like Florida had, simply because it's you used to a bye week, but you're not used to 2 bye weeks, and so um, I think the over would be the right side just because I think Florida can put up. I mean, Florida can put up 35, 42 points, no problem. But I just you just don't know what to expect in this for them. But I do agree. I think that Florida defense is allowing points to anybody and everybody, and I think that Florida offense can score on anybody and everybody. So um, I would agree with you. I think the over would be the right side, and plus no one likes taking unders, so might as well take the over.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's all the games I really have to give out. Um, for our closing remarks, give me your top four and who you think is going to finish in that top four at the end of the year.
my top four right now would be Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, and I think I'm going to put Georgia back up there at four. There's a lot of teams right now that I think we've talked about it that are just not on the same level as those schools. But I think Georgia right now would be number four for me. I think there's some other schools out there that could get up to there, but that'd be my top four right now. I think probably at the end of the year, I think it's right now. If I had to pick the end of the year, I still would take those top three, and I'd still take Georgia simply because of everything that's going on in this year. One loss in the SEC to Alabama, and then if Georgia were to lose to them again in the SEC championship, I still think that would be the most impressive resume a one-loss regular season team could have. I don't think. I think the only team that could beat them in that case would be an undefeated Oklahoma State, who has no problem the rest of the way out. And even then, I still think a lot of people would say we have to take Georgia. But those are my top four teams right now. I think Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson are just on another level than anyone else. And that number one seed is the most important thing this year. And LSU proved that last year. That you can't be in that 2-3 game. That 2-3 game is a dogfight, tough game that you have to avoid at all costs.
Yeah, so for my top four right now, I'm going to go by the book. I'm going to go Clemson, put Bama 2, put Ohio State 3, and I'll give Notre Dame it right now. They haven't really played anybody, but they still have taken care of business outside of
Hmm.
that Louisville game, so we'll give them the fourth spot. I think that defense, like I said, is very good. Handbook definitely leaves a little more to be desired.
Yep.
End of the year, though, I'm going to go with I think Clemson has a hold on that one, and unless they have another slip up game like they did against Syracuse, I think they're going to hold that. I think I think Ohio State's going to be the 2 seed, and I think Bama's going to be the 3. I think Georgia's going to be the 4 because I think Georgia eventually gets to JT Daniels. I think Georgia is going to in that SEC championship game, I think Georgia could definitely beat Alabama, and that's why I have them at the 4 right now.
Hmm.
Because, like I said, they had a lead at halftime in that game against Bama, and then second half you have mistakes on offense, and I think with the JT Daniels, you don't have those mistakes, and it's a little more of an even game, especially without Jalen Waddle for Alabama. So I think that's
Hmm.
my top 4 right now.
Yeah, I think I think the top spot is Clemson's to lose, but we saw last year the committee valued LSU doing what they did, beating Georgia in the SEC championship game more than they valued Clemson going undefeated and winning the ACC. So I think it'll be interesting.
I
I
think
think the most interesting thing is does the committee value a team like Clemson who's going to play all their games, win, probably look impressive, win out, or do they value how do they value that compared to a team like Ohio State who we know was good, but they're only playing 8 games, and even if they look more impressive in those 8 games in Clemson, do they value Ohio State more
on I
because
think
they
this
looked more
is
impressive?
This is the interesting thing. We've talked about the difference between the top 3
Hmm.
and the rest of the conferences that they're in is big this year. It's big. I think, like we said, I think the difference between Clemson and the next best team, whether it's Notre Dame, your Miami, North Carolina, is big. I think the difference between Ohio State and that next best team, whether it's Penn State,
Hmm.
Wisconsin,
It's just as
Michigan,
big.
I think it's just as big. And I
Yes.
think they're going to realize that as we go out throughout the year. And I think the problem with the SEC this year is, like I said, I think Georgia gets Bama in that second game. But I think the problem is the SEC is not as deep this year. There's a little more struggle once you get outside the top half of the teams for, those teams like Auburn struggling, LSU's struggling. I don't know what to make of Florida. They've had
Hmm.
this break. Again, don't know what to make of A&M. They've won, haven't looked great. They've been good. So I think the SEC is not as powerful as they have been in years past. So I think that's why.
Right. I agree with you there. Yeah, I agree, and I think it's just I think this year it's almost like this year you can't. I mean, you can go wrong with how you rank the teams at the end of the year, but you almost can make an argument for any way it falls. You can say, well, this was our logic, and I think a lot of people would say, well, given everything that's happened, that makes sense, right? And um, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think if you're those top 3 teams, you just have to continue to go out and dominate everyone, and you have to just make the best case. No matter how many games you play, no matter how many games get canceled, whatever, you just have to go out there and say, "This is our resume. We beat every team by X amount of points. This was our average margin of victory. We did everything we could."
Yeah,
And I think that's what you have to do because
yeah,
there's no telling how this year could finish.
right. Especially if you're Ohio State, every game matters. You don't know what's
Hmm.
going to happen. You have
Hmm.
not that much leeway. You got to beat teams as big and get that eye test going. Make sure you make a statement every game, every
Yep.
chance you have.
Yep, I agree with you, and yeah, I'm excited. I think it's gonna be interesting. I really do. And it's 5:41 right now. We're an hour away from less than an hour away from the Maryland Minnesota game to kick off the weekend. And best of luck to you this weekend. Hope your UCF Knights pull out another win, and
Boy,
you know.
probably see a lot of points in that game. Hope Iowa State, rolls over Kansas there.
Let me just say my parents are coming to visit Anna and I tomorrow for my birthday, and my dad and I are going to watch the game together. And man, I tell you what, if Iowa State doesn't look good, or if they, God forbid, if they keep it close and Kansas finds a way, I mean I don't know if I'd be here next week to meet up with you for this again, because I think that would be like, I mean, I just don't know how you come back from that, but yeah, it'll should be a good weekend for the both of us, and
Yeah.
hopefully
Next
our,
weekend.
our picks do well.
Yeah, next weekend's a big weekend, so I look forward to talking to you next week, see how things turn out this weekend, and talk about next week's slate, which has a lot of good games.
Yeah, got the Maction back on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the Pac-12 back next week as well?
Yes.
So we'll be back to full strength, and man, I tell you what, Wednesday night, every single MAC team is playing. It's
Playing. It's a
football is
beautiful
officially
thing.
back on Wednesday.
Beautiful thing to see when we get those action games going.
God, just take me to Bowling Green, Ohio, and let's ride with no one in the stands.
Yeah.